Okay, imagine this. A young man, uh, barely an adult, really, very little formal schooling, hardly any money. And he just sets off into the Amazon jungle, these, mysterious islands in Southeast Asia. What makes someone do that? That's what we're getting into today. Alfred Russel Wallace, his life, his ideas. We're looking at accounts of his journey, and it's pretty remarkable. Our mission really is to figure out what drove him, the massive challenges he faced, and why his work, especially in unnatural selection, still matters so much. It's a story about pushing through, about being curious. I think they're lessons for anyone really facing tough stuff. We'll be focusing on parts that really bring his travels and discoveries to life. Okay, let's dive in.
Yeah, and what jumps out right away is just how different his situation was compared to, say, other big-name scientists back then. We often picture Victorian science as this thing for wealthy guys. Good education, lots of connections, resources. Wallace, totally a different story. Born in 1823, had to leave school at 14, work for a living. His trips weren't funded by some family fortune. They were financially risky. He had to collect and sell specimens just to survive, just to get by.
Right. That pressure must have been immense.
Exactly. But maybe that necessity actually made him a sharper observer, in a different way.
Absolutely. Think about that determination. Heading into the Amazon, knowing your next meal, your ticket home, depends on finding and cataloging things. It really does make you ask what kind of, inner fire pushes someone to risk absolutely everything just to learn something new.
That's a really good question. And maybe his lack of um, formal training was actually a benefit in some ways.
Mm.
He wasn't stuck in old ways of thinking. He learned directly from what he saw, what he experienced, and the hardships in the Amazon. I mean, the mosquitoes, constant threat of disease, maybe even starvation.
Mm.
These weren't just things to get past.
You were part of the learning process.
Yeah, exactly. They sort of shaped how he saw the connections in nature, forced him to pay incredibly close attention to how organisms related to their environment.
And that environment got even harsher, didn't it? That ship fire in 1852, losing everything he'd collected, years of work.
Oh, devastating. Just gone. Thousands of specimens you just can't replace.
So here's the thing that gets me. Who wouldn't just give up after that, after losing years of your life's work, just like that?
It's staggering to think about. A huge blow. Scientifically and personally, it would have crushed most people. But Wallace, his reaction shows this incredible resilience. He didn't just fall apart. He gets back to England, okay, but he doesn't just stop. He regroups, thinks things through, and then plans something even bigger.
The Malay Archipelago.
Right, 8 years exploring the Malay Archipelago. It suggests this wasn't just a job for him. It was something deeper, like a real calling.
8 years, crisscrossing islands in what's now Indonesia and Malaysia. Imagine the sheer effort. Tiny boats, often alone, always under threat of getting sick, malaria, dysentery, these terrible fevers, plus, volcanoes, earthquakes, just raw nature. It's hard to wrap your head around the fact that these were the places where he had his biggest breakthroughs.
And it's right there in that incredibly varied landscape that he makes one of his biggest contributions,
Hmm.
the Wallace Line.
Yeah.
What he noticed was this really clear, sharp division between the animals of Asia and the animals of Australia, right there in the archipelago. Even though some of these islands are pretty close together, geographically speaking.
Yeah, it's stark, isn't it? Like placental mammals on one side, marsupials on the other. Not a gradual change, but boom, a line.
Exactly. It wasn't just, oh, that's interesting. It was a genuine puzzle. Why this sudden split? It showed how geography shapes life, shapes evolution. That line exists because of deep ocean trenches that were barriers for land animals for ages.
So animals couldn't cross, and they evolved separately on either side.
Precisely. He was laying the groundwork for biogeography, understanding why species are where they are. And those ideas about barriers are still fundamental today.
Okay, and then comes the moment, the big insight. You read about it happening on Ternate while he's sick with a fever. There's something almost dramatic about it. This huge idea hitting him, not in some lab, but while he's physically miserable. And that's when he figures out evolution by natural selection, independently.
That's right. Darwin had been working on similar ideas for a long time. But Wallace, completely on his own, in totally different circumstances, comes up with the same core mechanism. Species change because some individuals are better suited to survive, reproduce, pass on their traits. The fact that they both got there independently, it really says something about the power of the evidence they were both seeing in nature.
And what he did next, I think this really speaks volumes about him. He didn't rush to publish or claim priority. He sends his paper, his theory, to Darwin for feedback. I mean, think about that. The humility, the integrity. sharing your biggest breakthrough, knowing Darwin was the bigger name and might overshadow you, would you have done that?
It's remarkable, isn't it? That act really shows he cared more about the science itself than personal glory, and it led directly to that joint presentation of their ideas in 1858 at the Linnean Society. For Wallace, it seems the goal was pushing understanding forward. Sure, Darwin's big book later got more attention, but Wallace's independent discovery is absolutely crucial.
But Wallace was more than just the evolution guy, right? The sources show his thinking went much broader.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
His work on biogeography, like we said with the Wallace Line, was foundational. He basically started the field, laid the groundwork for ecology, too. He documented where countless animals lived, why they lived there, the role of barriers, environment. And even his definition of a species back then was surprisingly modern.
Hmm.
Plus, some science historians argue his ideas on how new species form, especially through geographic separation, were actually, in some ways, maybe even clearer than Darwin's early thoughts on it.
And beyond the pure science, he seems like this really complex person, deeply concerned about society. That's another fascinating layer. It's like his scientific insights fueled this wider sense of responsibility.
Yes, and that's often missed. He was really passionate about social justice across a whole range of things. Spoke out against slavery, against eugenics, which was gaining traction, then against vivisection. He fought for women's rights, for land reform. And amazingly, early on, he was talking about conservation.
Really?
Yeah.
Back then?
Yeah, warning about destroying tropical forests, valuing ecosystems, decades before it became mainstream. It's like his understanding of nature's interconnectedness made him see the need for ethical treatment in human society, too.
A real visionary. But the sources also mention he explored things outside mainstream science, like spiritualism. And that caused some issues.
That's true. He got interested in spiritualism, the nature of consciousness, things that made many scientific colleagues pretty uncomfortable. He wasn't afraid to ask questions that others dismissed as, unscientific or weird. That willingness to be a bit of a lone voice, as one source puts it, just shows his intense curiosity. He followed the questions where they led, even if it cost him standing in some circles.
So when we look back at Wallace's whole life, what are the big takeaways? What lasts beyond the specific discoveries?
I think fundamentally it's about resilience, about sheer perseverance against incredible odds. Finding opportunity when you start with nothing, rebuilding after losing everything, continuing to push boundaries, even when facing criticism. His life really shows that real breakthroughs often happen right at the edge of your comfort zone, where things get difficult, but your curiosity keeps you going.
That's really powerful, isn't it? Makes you think, are we, willing to step outside what's comfortable, to risk failing for the chance to see things differently, to learn something new?
Exactly. Wallace shows us that the path to knowledge isn't usually smooth. It's bumpy, needs courage, needs you to keep learning, keep adapting, but the payoff for yourself, for what we know collectively, can be huge.
So, as we wrap up this look at Alfred Russel Wallace, let's keep that image in mind. This young guy, against all odds, following his curiosity to the ends of the earth and changing how we see life itself. When you hit your own setbacks, maybe remember the naturalist who lost it all and just started again. When people doubt your ideas, think about the explorer who had a world-changing insight on a remote island, sick with fever. When you see unfairness, remember the scientist who spoke up for others. So the question for you is, what will you do when your storm hits? Will you turn back or push on, eyes open, curious? The adventure, in whatever form it takes, is yours to start. And let's end with Wallace's own words, tying it all together. Every species has come into existence coincident both in space and time with a closely allied species, something to think about as we explore our own world.